All right, this is tape number 14, and we're going to be talking a little bit of political philosophy today. What we're going to be talking about is a simple question. Imagine, if you will, that there's no government. How would people behave? Would people be generally good? Or would people be generally bad? This is the fundamental question of political philosophy. It has intrigued thinkers all over the world. The ancient Chinese, the ancient Greeks all wrote about this question. And it continues today. And in essence, it gets right to the heart of why government exists. And it's to protect us. Okay? Government is there to protect us. But does it need to protect us all the time? In other words, people are generally bad. Or does it need to protect us just some of the time because people are generally good? Now imagine if you're watching this and at the conclusion of the video, you step outside and you discover that there is no government. What would it be like? Would people be acting normally? Or would people be going crazy? That's really what we're talking about here. What would it be like if there was no government? Okay? Now, I want to get into this by examining two different political philosophers. So I'm going to pull out my magic whiteboard here and get out my marker. And the first philosopher you need to know is a guy named Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes. Some of you might remember a comic strip from years ago called Calvin and Hobbes. This is the Hobbes. Hobbes wrote a book called Leviathan. He wrote it in 1651. And what he said in that book is that if you take away government, people will generally be bad. Okay? And I want to read to you, and I want you to know this quote. He said that life without government would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. That is the key quote. Our key state, our life without government would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. By the way, that quote has a tendency to come up in the next exam. And our true state of nature would be a war of everyone against everyone else. So, the purpose of government is to protect us from each other. Because without government, we would be at war with everyone else. So Thomas Hobbes believes that people are generally bad, and government is there to impose order on them. Okay? So if you're a believer in that, and it turns out most Americans are, you're a Hobbesian. You believe in this philosophy of Thomas Hobbes in his book Leviathan, that people are generally bad. And without government, life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Okay? Now, there's another thought that comes up. And this is the idea that people are generally good. And this idea was best expressed by another philosopher named John Locke. Locke. John Locke. And he wrote a book in 1688. So he read Thomas Hobbes. He disagreed with Thomas Hobbes. And then he said, I'm going to disagree in a book. And the book is called Second treatise on government. Treatise is simply book. So his second book on government. He wrote a first one, didn't go over so well. The second one really made a difference. In this second book, he said, our true state of nature is that people are basically, and again, this is a quote, memorize it, people are basically decent, orderly, social-minded, and capable of self-government. Let me repeat that. He says that people are basically decent, orderly, social-minded, and capable of self-government. That last one, capable of self-government, is the key. Because if we can govern ourselves, if we can behave without the government standing over our shoulder, we really lessen the need for government protection. John Locke went on to say, we are by nature free, equal, and independent. And, this is the key thing, we enjoy the rights to life, liberty, and property. Does that last part sound familiar? We enjoy the rights to life, liberty, and property. Where have you heard that before? I bet you're thinking, yep, the Declaration of Independence. We enjoy the rights to life, liberty, and Thomas Jefferson changed it to pursuit of happiness. But Thomas Jefferson was a Lockean. The framers of the Constitution were Lockean. They looked at how they thought people would behave, and they decided that people would generally be good. Not all the time. And because they're not good all the time, you do need government. But because they're generally good, then you only need government for limited purposes. That concept of limited government we're going to talk about again when we get to the Constitution. Because that, in fact, is a key part of the Constitution. You only need government sometime. Okay? So, here's our political philosophers. Thomas Hobbes and his famous quote that life without government would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, and our true state of nature is a war of everyone against everyone. Okay? We need government to protect us from everybody else. And then John Locke came along 30 years later, 37 years later, and said, no, Hobbes is full of it. He said instead, our true state of nature is that people are basically decent, orderly, social-minded, and capable of self-government. We are by nature free, equal, and independent. And we enjoy the rights to life, liberty, and property. Okay? So, what we've got here, two different ideas of government, and what we're going to see in subsequent tapes are there are three types of government that are based on the ideas of Thomas Hobbes: authoritarian, totalitarian, and a monarchy. And there's one type of government that's based on the ideas of John Locke, and that's a democracy. So we're going to go through all those in subsequent tapes. But I need to leave you with this last thought. Most Americans, when you ask how would people behave if there was no government, most Americans would say that government is basically bad. Okay? And you can see why. You could see people going crazy, okay? Well, here's the fundamental contradiction in American life. While most of us believe that people are generally bad, we have a government that's based on the idea that people are generally good. That difference between bad and good causes conflicts all through our political life. I would argue that in 2020, One of the conflicts is, what do you do about protests? What do you do about police misbehavior? What do you do about a movement such as Black Lives Matter? In the end, all of that is related to this right here. What is the role of government? Are people generally good or bad? Can you have protests that do not go bad? Can you have protests where people criticize the police officers that don't become violent? That is all part of this very debate that's been going on for thousands of years. Okay? So, subsequent tapes, we're going to be talking about the different forms of government that are related to this. We'll start with the Hobbesian forms of government.